Have you ever felt like you're alone? Maybe you just never found a place for you to belong. Or maybe you just can't find the people you resonate with. Out of place, not fitting in, not feeling like you're accepted by the masses. That's okay. We all have that feeling at one point. Sometimes we just haven't found a place where we feel at home. The loneliness is suffocating. Isolated in a world with billions of people where no one is there to acknowledge our existence. So of course, your next step is to build a rocket, go to space, and meet aliens. Hoshikuzu Telepath is a masterpiece. It asks the question of what would you do if you can't find a place where you belong, and it does so in a way that is entertaining but that aren't immediately derogatory. This thing is love at first sight for me. I saw the key visual randomly while scrolling on Twitter, and I decided to just check the manga on a whim. The art style is beautiful, the story is very heartfelt, and despite it being a yonkoma, it managed to feel free-flowing, often breaking the 4-panel formula. Hoshikuzu Telepath was and kinda still is a hidden gem, which is kinda disappointing since I expected this to be the next Bocchi the Rock. But it has a lot to offer. It tackles the topic of self-worth, about overcoming a childhood trauma, a feeling of cluelessness, how it feels to lack foresight despite being perceived as perfect by people, and of course, what it's like to not fit in. I would love to go over each character in detail, but due to my prior experiences making an everything bagel, this video is going to focus on Umika's social anxiety. Umika is unable to connect with people. She feels a sort of barrier between her and the outside world. She feels like an outcast, someone left behind. She is traumatized. It seems to me she has a speech impediment of sorts because whenever she tried to say something, people called her weird. No one could understand her, or rather, no one wants to understand her. Umika was victim to some harsh words uttered by the ones around her. It has gotten so bad that Umika now sort of accepted the fact that no one on earth would understand her feelings, her words. She resorted to wishing for aliens to come adopt her instead. She is not looking forward to high school. She is afraid, anxious if you will. She is worried that she might not make any friends, or even to be able to talk to someone for that matter. The only line of hope she has now is if somehow, by some magic, an alien came down to Earth, burst in from the entrance, and came to save her. Yeah, that's kind of what happened. Akeuchi is a self-proclaimed alien. She did not know who she is or why she's there. All she knows is that there's this wet sopping cat on the sidewalk that needs emotional support. And naturally, Umika wants to get closer to her, but also naturally, she couldn't. You still want to know what the heck is going on with her though, so she... Ah yes, welcome to the main theme of the show. Yu has the power to look into someone else's mind by way of touching foreheads. At last, Umika had someone that understands her feelings. But of course, she's still hesitant. Yes, there's this being that can somehow read minds, but what's stopping them from saying mean things again? To which Yu gave Umika some much needed reassurance. She will not laugh at Umika. I feel like this is a key moment in establishing the choral theme of the show, and also how her anxiety will be depicted. Umika felt lonely because no one wants to be with her. She has no one to talk to, and fundamentally that's what she needed most. Knowing that though, she's still afraid at talking to people. She did not want to risk going through all that traumatic experience again. What you finally provided to her wasn't just some reassuring words, it's genuine understanding, an outlet for Umika to finally express her feelings at last. This series takes the subject matter very seriously. Rasuko Okuma, the author of the manga, studies emotional support for mentally disabled children. This was her field of research, whereas some other just like me for real characters are written based on its author's personal experiences, Umika was written almost from a third-person perspective. Rasuko-sensei based Umika off of the myriad of people she helped, the various experience they had and what Rasuko-sensei had to do for them. She knows the ins and outs of this condition well, and she is very careful to not depict social anxiety under a negative light. The thing itself really avoids trying to romanticize the condition too much. Yes, they tried to make Umika's "oh no people" situation funny, but at no point did it say Umika is comfortable with her way of being. She is constantly confronting her fears, often intentionally breaking out of her comfort zone, until eventually she is able to stand up for herself. She really wants to change for the better. I feel like if anything, Yu is the self-insert, because Rasuko really wants to help others like Umika, so it's still written from personal experience, it just came from another perspective. As a matter of fact, Yu is kind of the therapist of the group. It's not to say that self-depictions of social anxiety are inferior though. Heck, I mean bocchi, the pink blob one, is still very good. But she was very much written as a coping mechanism, a personal experience, to portray social anxiety as something one should need to be scared of, in ways you all should be familiar by now. Unfortunately, that came with a bit of a fatal flaw. Without a second eye to proofread it, you'll risk missing out on important things, both for the character and, well, yourself. This video isn't about bocchi, but I do want to mention that her portrayal in the manga is slightly more derogatory, with her friends even getting second-hand embarrassment by her existence at some point. Now, I'm not saying umika is the holy grail depiction of social anxiety, but her character has a lot more care to it. Everything about her feels intentional. It feels real, like man, I can feel her. It's not full-on Puss in Boots panic attack scene realistic, but it's not bocchi headspace slapstick either. That somewhere in between spot just hit me for some reason. It feels like if I were in the same spot as her, it would be perfectly reasonable for me to follow her footsteps, little by little. It's not magic. To trust the process is likely the hardest part of doing this. For anyone, it can sometimes feel like you're just falling into an endless void. No end in sight, just darkness. We still need something, or someone, to cling on to. And that's where Yu the alien comes in, along with her other two friends that they eventually met. Haruno, a caring but ultimately directionless person, and Raimon, Actually, Raimon has similar issues to Umika, with that whole not fitting in bit, only she handles it in a completely different way. But we're pressed for time here, so a discussion about Haruno looking for her true calling and Raimon having trust issues due to her past is left as an exercise to the viewer. Speaking of them, so this whole show is about Umika wanting to build a rocket. Yu also wants to help because, well, she's an alien. Of course, interplanetary travel is highly improbable for some lowly high school students, so they compromised with model rockets. I mean, it's close enough. It is how most people get into the space industry after all. Umika's ambition to reach space sounds very wild when said out loud. And yeah, that's why she's hesitant to even talk about it to anyone. But eventually, other than Yu, she convinced two other people to join in. Haruno Takaragi is a bit of a comic relief. Of all the main cast, she's likely the most normal one, and Raimon Matataki, which, while a bit hard to persuade, she eventually convinced anyways. She's the one with actual engineering experience. Finally having friends is great, but they're more than that. They're teammates now, people from various backgrounds working together on a single goal. Now, because this whole operation was partly Umika's idea, she needs to lead the team somehow, and her friends agree to let her be the leader. Now there comes the second predicament of this. How can a person that has trouble talking to anyone communicate about their own ideas? When they were first officially recognized as a Rocket Group Association, Raimon kind of felt betrayed because it basically means they aren't good enough to be recognized as an actual club. Umika, however, is fine with the association title. They can gather achievements as the time goes on and improve themselves with the school's recognition. She wanted to give it a shot. While it took Umika some substantial courage to say that, her friends agreed with her. It sounds very logical. Umika now feels comfortable with expressing her feelings. They decided to enter the Model Rocket Championship as means to prove things to themselves. Of course, being first-timers, they didn't immediately win to the next round, but to them, it's devastating. They worked day and night for this moment and it all felt like it's for nothing. To Umika, she's worried that this might be the end of them. The group barely talked to each other since that day. Even Yu at some point starts to distance herself. Her sister told her to go for a walk because she's been locking herself up in her room for almost a week. On the road, she met Kei Akizuki. Now, Kei is an interesting character. She came from Tatsuoka High School of Science and Technology, so you know she means business. She's basically the one that beat them back on the rocket contest. Very senior, but also very dumb. Being the more experienced one, she gave her word of advice. To her, Umika and Francis' rocket wasn't a failure. On the contrary, she was amazed that some first-timers were able to launch a rocket so cleanly despite the rather windy weather. They just flew it too high, that's all. Kei then asked what inspired Umika to build a rocket. Umika told her everything. Space, aliens, finding a place to belong, all of the things that she would usually be ridiculed for. Instead, Kei shows appreciation, finding it both endearing and inspiring. She would then point out the fact that Umika's friends didn't make fun of it either. They wanted to be a part of it. and thus they join Umika in her dreams, entrusting her to be their leader. There might be a place for you to belong on this planet. She needs to take good care of it. Episode 9 is widely regarded in the community as the hardest episode of the whole season. There's so many things going on, they're all at their lowest point, but somehow despite everything there's still hope. This is the part where it becomes glaringly obvious what this series is trying to do, that it's not just bocchi with rockets as its first impression might imply. That's what I mean at the start when I say this show takes itself seriously. Umika always wanted a place to belong, people that can understand her feelings. Well, eventually she got that place, one she didn't expect. And more than that, they're friends that are willing to join her, who share the same dream. But now, it's her turn to understand what her friends are feeling, what they're dealing with, how to get them back up again, to also be there when they needed it. It's a mutual relationship that eventually proved itself to be very beneficial going forward. This arc also shows another weak point of Umika, or actually the whole Model Rocket Association. Failure stings, absolutely. It's normal to feel down after seeing your hard work seemingly not paying off. But that's the point of learning. For example, Kei. She and her team is more experienced than them all. To Umika, it looks like she's just built different. At one point, Umika was intimidated by her apparent seniority. But in actuality, that just means Kei had experienced more failure than them. She learns from her mistakes. One by one, she deals with her shortcomings, analyzing what's wrong, making adjustments, asking for help. Kei's advice to Umika was essentially to face her weaknesses head-on, to not get discouraged, there's always a second chance, to instead treat this failure as a learning experience. They still have a long way to go. Being a leader is to bring your team forwards, to understand their feelings, to encourage everyone to keep moving on. And I just think this is a beautiful message set through the perspective of someone that's barely able to make complete sentences at the start of the season. Covering manga time Kirara has almost been a yearly tradition, and it's for a reason. I really like them. Well, to be perfectly honest, I haven't been neck deep into this. As a matter of fact, I haven't even watched Madoka Magica, but for the few things I did experience, I find each to tackle a different part of myself, which is honestly amazing to find that my calling is actually in a Yuri Yonkoma magazine. From the first time I flipped through the Stardust Telepath manga, I'm just really mesmerized with the gorgeous art and honest to god down to earth storytelling. The anime is even better. It faithfully adapts the source material while adding a whole bunch of original story elements. This show is like a weekly therapy session for me, quite fitting if you remember what I said about the author of this series. While I had some doubts about the anime adaptation, considering the track record of the studio, thankfully, it turned out to be way better than I expected. You know, I was sort of disappointed that the anime didn't turn out to be the next Bocchi to Rock that I'd hoped for. Well, I guess you can say this video has the opposite problem of my last Manga Time Kirara video, but I like to say the silver lining from all of this. I'm really glad that I found this series, that I was able to just soak it all in for myself. In a way, this thing as a hidden gem means it just makes it more special, and also not having to deal with Twitter discourse makes it all the better. All in all, yeah, this is good. I like it. 9.5 out of 10 would smash myself into the wall again.